The pattern I am tracking right now is one of the most active and volatile setups I have seen for the United States in several years, and I want to be direct with you about what the next 7 to 10 days are going to look like across a very large portion of this country. This is not a situation where we have one notable storm followed by a quiet recovery period. What the latest model data is showing is a jet stream configuration that is actively cycling through storm systems one after another, delivering rounds of significant winter weather to the Midwest, the Ohio Valley, and the Northeast, while simultaneously creating a temperature contrast so extreme that the southern plains are running near 80 degrees Fahrenheit at the same time that Arctic air is producing life-threatening wind chills across the northern tier. That kind of contrast, 80 degrees in Oklahoma City and sub-zero wind chills in Minneapolis within the same atmospheric column, is not just a curiosity. It is the fuel that drives intense storm development, and right now that fuel is abundant. On top of the winter storm threat, the same pattern evolution that is driving this active week is also laying the groundwork for a significant severe weather return as we move into early March, and I want to address that as well before we are done today. There is a lot to cover, and I want to get through all of it systematically so you have a clear picture of what is coming and when. Let me start with the jet stream, because understanding what it is doing right now explains everything else in this forecast. We currently have an extremely amplified upper-level pattern, a deep trough digging into the central United States from Canada, flanked by ridges on both the west and east sides. That trough is acting like a highway for Arctic air, pulling it south from Canada into the plains and the Midwest with very little resistance. At the same time, the ridge to the east is allowing warm, moist air from the Gulf of Mexico to stream northward along the eastern side of the trough. When those two air masses collide, the Arctic air pushing south and the Gulf moisture pushing north, you get the conditions for rapid storm development. What makes this week particularly significant is that the jet stream is not just doing this once. It is cycling through this configuration repeatedly, which means each time one storm system exits to the northeast, the pattern reloads and another system develops in essentially the same region. That is what I mean when I describe a storm train. The individual storms matter, but the pattern that is producing them matters more, and that pattern is not breaking down this week. The most immediate and significant event in this sequence is the winter storm developing for this weekend, and confidence on this system has been increasing steadily over the past 48 hours. The low pressure center will develop across the southern plains Friday night and track northeastward through the Ohio Valley Saturday into Sunday. As it does, it will draw a substantial moisture feed from the Gulf while simultaneously pulling Arctic air southward on its western flank. The precipitation shield with this system is going to be broad. I'm currently tracking significant winter weather impacts from eastern Kansas and Missouri all the way through Ohio, Indiana, Pennsylvania, and into the Northeast. Let me go through the specific regions and what I expect for each one. Across the Midwest, eastern Kansas, Missouri, and southern Illinois, the storm will bring a combination of snow and freezing rain. The rain-snow-freezing rain line is going to be a critical and somewhat uncertain boundary in this area because the temperature gradient across this region is extremely tight. Right now, I'm expecting 3 to 6 inches of snow across northern Missouri and central Illinois, but areas near the freezing rain boundary, Kansas City, Springfield, and St. Louis, could see a glaze of ice accumulate before the precipitation transitions. I want to flag that ice potential specifically because even a quarter inch of ice accumulation on roads that have not been pre-treated creates dangerous travel conditions. Confidence on the exact placement of that freezing rain zone is still building, and I would not be surprised if it shifts slightly north or south over the next 24 hours. Moving into the Ohio Valley, Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky, and West Virginia, this is where I have the highest confidence in the heaviest snowfall totals. The track of the low pressure center brings the prime snow zone directly through this region, and the temperature profile is cold enough to support high snowfall rates. I'm currently expecting 6 to 12 inches of snow across a broad swath from Indianapolis through Columbus, Dayton, and Cincinnati. Louisville sits near the southern edge of that zone and will likely see 4 to 7 inches, with some potential for a brief freezing rain transition on the southern end. Cleveland and Pittsburgh are both in a favorable position for heavier totals. I'm looking at 8 to 14 inches for those cities, and with lake enhancement adding to the totals east of Cleveland, portions of northeastern Ohio and western Pennsylvania could push even higher. There is still some spread in the models on the exact northern extent of the heaviest snow band, and I'm watching that carefully. If the low tracks slightly further south than currently modeled, the heaviest totals shift south as well, and the Ohio Valley picks up more at the expense of the Northeast. Conversely, a slightly more northern track brings more snow to Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, and New York City. For the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast, the storm arrives Saturday night into Sunday morning. Current guidance suggests a swath of 6 to 10 inches for Philadelphia and the surrounding suburbs, with New York City looking at 5 to 9 inches. I want to be careful with those numbers because the track sensitivity is real at this range, and I will have better confidence within the next 24 hours. What I can tell you with higher confidence is that the interior Northeast, central and western Pennsylvania, upstate New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, and western Massachusetts will see very significant snowfall from this system. I'm looking at 10 to 16 inches in many of those areas, with locally higher amounts possible in favored terrain. For the Boston Metro and eastern Massachusetts, the storm arrives Sunday morning, and I'm currently tracking 6 to 12 inches, though the exact totals will depend heavily on how the system's moisture interacts with the cold air in place. Snowfall rates at the peak of the storm will be significant, 1 to 2 inches per hour in the heaviest bands across the Ohio Valley and 1 to 3 inches per hour in southern New England. And those rates will make travel dangerous even in areas that are accustomed to handling winter storms. Now, I want to address the temperature contrast in this pattern because it is genuinely extreme and it has direct operational consequences for the storm forecast. While snow is falling in Indianapolis and Columbus this weekend, Oklahoma City will be sitting near 75 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit. That is not an exaggeration. The warm sector of this storm system extends deep into the southern plains, and temperatures there will be running 25 to 35 degrees above normal for late February. Dallas and Fort Worth could approach 70 degrees Saturday afternoon at the same time that Cincinnati is in the middle of a snowstorm. That kind of temperature gradient compressed into a few hundred miles is what drives the intensity of the storm system. The tighter the gradient, the more energy is available for storm development, and the more rapidly the low pressure center can intensify. I am watching the rate of intensification on this weekend system closely, because if the low deepens faster than currently modeled, the precipitation rates and wind speeds on the northern side of the storm will be higher than current forecasts suggest. Right now, I do not think that scenario is the most likely outcome, but it is a possibility I am not dismissing. Behind the weekend storm, temperatures will fall sharply across the Midwest and Ohio Valley Sunday night into Monday. I also want to specifically address the freezing rain threat on the southern edge of this system, because it is easy to focus on snowfall totals and overlook the ice component. And the ice component is often where the most serious infrastructure damage occurs. From central Tennessee through northern Mississippi and into portions of northern Alabama, the precipitation type through Saturday night will be primarily freezing rain rather than snow. Even modest ice accumulations in that range, a quarter to a half inch, are enough to make roads completely impassable, coat power lines, and bring down tree limbs that are already stressed from previous winter events. Utility crews in Tennessee and Mississippi are still working through the damage from the storm earlier this month, and another round of significant ice accumulation in those areas would set back restoration efforts considerably. I want that to register clearly. This is not a secondary concern. For the areas in the freezing rain zone, ice is the primary hazard from this weekend's storm, and preparation there needs to reflect that. Wind chills across northern Indiana, Ohio, and Michigan will drop to -10 to -25 degrees by Monday morning. The cold will reinforce quickly, and any snow that falls during the weekend event will remain on the ground through at least midweek. Road treatment will be difficult in the coldest areas, and the compacted snow and ice hazard on secondary roads will persist for several days after the storm exits. I want to flag this particularly for areas like central Ohio and western Pennsylvania, where multiple rounds of accumulating snow over the past 2 weeks have already created significant challenges for road crews and infrastructure maintenance teams. Looking ahead to the beginning of March, the pattern evolution is pointing toward a transition that deserves careful attention. The deep trough currently over the central U.S. begins to lift northward and shift westward as a new ridge develops over the Pacific. When that happens, the cold air source over Canada becomes less directly accessible to the central U.S., and the storm track begins to shift. But the shift is not toward quiet weather. What I'm seeing in the medium-range guidance is a trough developing off the west coast around the first week of March, with energy ejecting eastward into the plains and interacting with an increasingly strong moisture return from the Gulf. That setup, combined with the rapid temperature recovery that will occur as the Arctic air retreats, creates the conditions for the severe weather season to get underway. The ingredients for organized tornado and severe thunderstorm activity include strong wind shear, instability, and a surface boundary to focus lift. And by early March, all of those ingredients will be available across the southern plains, the Mississippi Valley, and the Southeast. I am not issuing a specific severe weather outlook for early March today. The timing and placement of individual events at that range carry too much uncertainty for a precise forecast. What I can tell you is that the pattern strongly supports an early and active severe weather start to March. And if you are in Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, or Tennessee, this is a transition you need to be watching closely as we move through the final days of February. The overall picture for the next 10 days is one of sustained and significant weather impacts across a very large portion of the United States. The weekend winter storm brings heavy snow to the Ohio Valley and Northeast. Dangerous temperature contrasts set the stage for intense storm development. The cold that follows is severe enough to extend hazardous conditions well into next week, and the severe weather season is beginning to signal its return for early March. I want to thank you for following along with this forecast. I will have updated totals for the weekend storm within the next 24 hours as confidence continues to build. And I will be tracking the early March severe weather pattern closely as we get into the final stretch of February. Stay with me on this. The next 10 days are going to require close attention, and I will have everything you need right here.